Okay, so picture this. You're a deep sea diver exploring an ancient shipwreck, right? You're surrounded by all this, typical stuff, amphorae, maybe some old coins, the usual.
Yeah, standard shipwreck stuff.
Exactly. But then, amongst all that, you find this weird contraption made of bronze gears, almost like a clock.
Hmm.
But here's the thing, it's not just telling time, it's like some kind of crazy ancient computer capable of predicting the positions of stars and planets.
Oh yeah, and even eclipses. It's the Antikythera mechanism. One of the most fascinating examples of what we call OPARTS, out-of-place artifact.
Okay, OOPARTS, out-of-place artifacts. Lay it on me. What are we talking about here?
Well, think of it this way. Historians and archaeologists, they work super hard piecing together timelines, right? Using all sorts of evidence. Pottery styles, carbon dating, you name it.
Right, trying to figure out what happened when. Makes sense.
Yeah, but then along come these OOPARTS, objects found in archaeological contexts that just completely throw a wrench in those timelines.
So basically, stuff that seems way too advanced for the time it was made.
Precisely. And it raises so many questions, like, were ancient civilizations far more advanced than we give them credit for? Or are there just these massive gaps in our understanding of history?
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, right, we're excavating an ancient Egyptian tomb and we find something that looks like, I don't know, a modern day smartphone. Would that be considered an OPART?
Absolutely. That would be a textbook example. Imagine trying to explain that find to, well, anyone living back then. It'd be like finding a perfectly preserved smartphone embedded in, say, a dinosaur fossil.
Okay, I'm starting to get it now. So we've touched on the Antikythera mechanism, which is obviously a pretty mind-blowing OPART. But what are some other examples that, really make you question everything you thought you knew about history?
Oh, there are tons of fascinating examples. Want to hear about ancient batteries?
Ancient batteries, you're kidding, right?
I'm dead serious. We're talking about the Baghdad battery. Basically clay jars dating back about 2,000 years that contain metal cylinders and rods.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What were they using batteries for back then?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some scholars believe they were used for electroplating, like coating objects with a thin layer of metal. Others suggest they were for something more ritualistic, maybe tied to their religious practices.
So regardless of what they were used for, the fact that they even existed at all implies, like, a knowledge of electrochemistry way, way before we thought it was possible.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've only just started our deep dive into the world of OOPARTS.
So if ancient batteries weren't enough to make me question everything I learned in history class, what else is there? Is there anything that's even more, I don't know, mind-blowing?
Oh, absolutely. Fast forward a few centuries and let's talk maps. Specifically, the Piri Reis map, an Ottoman-era map drawn in 1513.
Okay, an old map, so what?
Well, this map seems to show parts of the Americas and even Antarctica in shockingly accurate detail. And this was like long before those continents were supposedly discovered.
Hold on, you're saying there's a map from the 1500s that shows Antarctica? How is that even remotely possible?
That's the mystery, right? People who believe in these OPARTS, they often point to this map as evidence that maybe, just maybe, the Piri Reis map was based on way older source maps. Maybe from a civilization that had already explored those places. A civilization with really, really advanced map-making skills. Civilization we haven't even discovered yet.
Ooh, okay, now you're talking. Lost civilizations mapping the entire globe before recorded history. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night.
Right. It gets even wilder. Let's go even further back in time, like way, way back, to South Africa, where we find these mysterious metallic spheres.
Okay, I'm listening. What are we talking about here?
Picture this. Perfectly round balls, like spheres, with grooves etched into them. And these things are found embedded in rock layers that are over 2 billion years old.
2 billion years? That's like older than the dinosaurs. What could they possibly be? Some kind of ancient marble collection?
Well, the scientific community is kind of split on this one. Some folks think they're just natural formations, like mineral nodules that formed over a ridiculously long time.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. But 2 billion years is a long time for nature to just, like, make perfect spheres.
Right. And that's why others look at the near-perfect shape of these things and those grooves, and they argue that they just look too engineered to be natural.
So we could be looking at evidence of, like, human-like technology from 2 billion years ago. My brain is officially melting.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to wrap your head around. And if those spheres really are artificial, it throws a major wrench into our understanding of, like, the whole evolution of intelligent life on Earth.
Okay, so we've got ancient computers, ancient batteries, maps that shouldn't exist, and potentially evidence of super ancient technology. All these OOPARTS are really making me question, well, everything. What do you make of all this? What does it mean for how we understand history?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's a question that's got researchers scratching their heads. But here's what's so cool about these OOPARTS. They force us to confront the limits of what we know. They remind us that there are still so many mysteries out there, whole chapters of history that are just waiting to be discovered.
It's like history is this giant jigsaw puzzle, and we keep finding these pieces that just don't fit anywhere. It's exciting and a little bit scary at the same time.
I totally agree. And that's exactly what makes studying OOPARTS so captivating. They push us to be skeptical, to stay curious, and to be open-minded about the past. They make us question what we think we know and embrace the possibility that maybe, just maybe, our ancestors were far more advanced than we give them credit for.
Well, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. Of all these OOPARTS, that Antikythera mechanism is really sticking with me. I'm dying to learn more about how this thing actually worked. Can we, dive a little deeper into that?
Absolutely. The Antikythera mechanism is a true marvel of ancient engineering. And thanks to recent research using, get this, 3D reconstruction techniques, we're learning even more about its complexity.
3D reconstructions? That sounds super high-tech. Tell me more about how that works.
So imagine using X-rays and CT scans, like the kind you get at the hospital, but for ancient artifacts. Scientists are using these technologies to create virtual models of the Antikythera mechanism. It's like digitally peeling back layers of time to reveal its secrets.
Wow, so they can see what's hidden beneath the surface without even having to touch the actual artifact. That's amazing.
It is. And the things they've discovered with these 3D reconstructions have only added to the mystery of the Antikythera mechanism. For example, we now know it wasn't just tracking the sun and moon, it was tracking the movements of the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks too.
They were mapping out the solar system over 2,000 years ago.
Why?
I need to know more. How did this thing actually work?
Well, let's take a closer look at those intricate gears and explore the genius of the ancient engineers who created this astronomical marvel.
Lead the way. I'm all ears.
Okay, imagine this.
Yeah.
You're a researcher back in the early 1900s, and you're looking at this, lump of corroded bronze fresh out of a shipwreck.
Yeah, not exactly something I'd get excited about.
Right. Covered in barnacles, sediment. You'd probably just toss it back in the ocean. But luckily, someone decided to take a closer look, and as they started cleaning it, guess what they found?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Intricate gears. Precisely cut and arranged in a way that no one expected to see in ancient technology.
Whoa, gears, like in a clock.
Yeah.
But we're talking about something from 2,000 years ago.
Exactly. And not just any gears. These were complex. Clearly part of some sophisticated system. A system designed with a deep understanding of both mechanics and astronomy.
Okay, so at first they thought it was maybe just a navigational tool, like an astrolabe.
Yeah, that was the initial thought. But as they studied it further, it became clear that the Antikythera mechanism was something way more advanced.
So what was it actually designed for? If it wasn't just for, helping sailors find their way around.
Well, get this. It was essentially an analog computer, capable of predicting astronomical events with incredible accuracy.
Wait, a computer? From that long ago? Are you serious?
I'm totally serious. It could track the movements of the sun, moon, planets, you name it. It could even predict eclipses and even account for the irregular orbit of the moon.
Okay, hold up. They had a machine that could predict eclipses 2,000 years ago. My mind is officially blown. How is that even possible?
Right. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The mechanism relied on a whole series of interlocking bronze gears, each one carefully calibrated to represent the cycles of celestial bodies. Turn a crank, and you could basically fast forward or rewind time, see how the positions of stars and planets would change.
So it's like a mechanical model of the solar system?
You got it. And keep in mind, this was centuries before telescopes. They were doing all this with just naked eye observations and serious math skills.
That's incredible. But if it was that advanced, why haven't we found more stuff like it? Was it a one-of-a-kind thing?
That's the question that's been bugging scholars for ages. Some theories suggest that maybe the Antikythera mechanism is the only one left. Maybe there was a whole tradition of advanced engineering in ancient Greece workshops full of skilled artisans making these incredible devices.
Yeah.
But then, over time, those artifacts got lost, destroyed, corroded away. Who knows?
So there should be a whole hidden history of ancient Greek tech out there just waiting to be rediscovered.
Isn't that a wild thought? And those 3D reconstructions we talked about earlier, they're adding even more fuel to the fire.
Right, those digital models. So what have they revealed about the inscriptions on the mechanism?
Well, they've revealed a ton of astronomical and calendrical data. Basically, instructions on how to use the mechanism and interpret the readings, plus new details about its functions. Like, get this, it could even track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games.
Seriously, so it was like an ancient almanac and high-tech calendar all rolled into one. But here's what I don't get. If the ancient Greeks could create something this complex, what happened? Why didn't that knowledge just keep evolving?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Historians have some ideas, of course. Some point to the decline of the Roman Empire and how the focus shifted away from science and engineering. Others think that maybe the knowledge to build these things was limited to a small group of people, specific workshops. And when those people or those workshops disappeared, so did the knowledge.
So this incredible knowledge was just lost. Maybe due to a perfect storm of historical circumstances. It's kind of a sad thought, isn't it? Imagine what could have been if they'd kept innovating.
Yeah, it's definitely a what if that makes you think. But even if we never fully understand the extent of ancient Greek engineering, the Antikythera mechanism is still a powerful reminder that we shouldn't underestimate our ancestors. They were capable of incredible things.
The more we learn about it, the more amazing it gets. It really changes how we think about what ancient civilizations could achieve. But, we've been focusing a lot on the Antikythera mechanism. What about those other OOPARTS we talked about? Any new discoveries about them?
Oh, there are always new discoveries popping up. Remember those mysterious metallic spheres from South Africa?
Yeah, the ones that are, ridiculously old.
Those ones. Well, there's been some new research that might explain how they form naturally.
Really? So maybe they weren't made by, some super advanced ancient civilization after all?
Possibly. This new research is looking into something called nodule growth.
Nodule growth. Layman's terms, please.
Okay, so basically geological nodules can form over millions of years. Minerals slowly build up around a central point, creating these, nodules.
Interesting. So these spheres, they could just be naturally occurring nodules that happen to be, perfectly round.
That's one of the theories being explored. But of course, it's not a done deal. There are still researchers who think that those spheres and those grooves, they just look too deliberate to be natural.
So the mystery continues. It's like with OOPARTS, there are always more questions than answers. But that's part of what makes them so fascinating, isn't it?
Totally. They force us to constantly rethink what we think we know about the past. And speaking of rethinking, what about the Baghdad battery? Any news on that front?
Oh yeah, those ancient batteries. What's the latest?
Well, there's been a lot of new interest in the Baghdad battery, especially in the field of experimental archaeology.
Experimental archaeology. Sounds intense. What is that exactly?
It's actually really cool. Researchers basically try to recreate ancient technologies and practices, but they can only use materials and methods that would have been available back then.
So they're like ancient tech enthusiasts building gadgets from scratch?
Exactly. And it's not just for fun. By trying to replicate these objects, they can learn a ton about the skills and knowledge that ancient people had.
Makes sense. So how does this tie back to the Baghdad battery?
Well, several researchers have actually managed to build working replicas of the Baghdad battery, using only materials and techniques that would have been available in ancient Mesopotamia.
No way. So you're telling me they can actually create electricity using those clay jars and metal rods?
Yep, it's been done. And it's given a lot more weight to the idea that the Baghdad battery was actually used for some practical purpose, even if we don't know exactly what that purpose was.
It's amazing how we can use modern science to solve ancient mysteries. But after all this research and experimentation, are we any closer to figuring out the whole OOPART thing? Do we have any definitive answers about where they came from and what they were used for?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it brings us to the heart of the OOPART debate. We've definitely learned a lot through scientific analysis and all this experimental archaeology. But figuring out how OOPARTs fit into our understanding of history is still a huge challenge.
So even with all our fancy technology and research, we're still basically just speculating when it comes to OOPARTs.
Not entirely. We've made some great strides in understanding how they were made, what materials they used, and even some possible uses. But the question of how they fit into the bigger picture of history, that's still very much up for debate.
The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. It's a humbling thought, but also kind of exciting.
I agree. And that's what makes studying OOPARTs so captivating. They remind us to stay humble, to be open to new ideas, and to always question what we think we know about the past.
Well said. Speaking of questioning, let's go back to that Piri race map. The one that supposedly shows things it shouldn't. What about it intrigues you the most?
Ah, yes. The map that seems to predate the discovery of the Americas and even Antarctica. What aspect are you most curious about?
Well, it's those supposedly accurate details that really get me. The stuff that they supposedly couldn't have known back then. What are some specific examples?
Okay, so one of the most striking things about the Piri Reis map is how it depicts the South American coastline. It's incredibly similar to modern maps, and it even shows details of islands in the Caribbean that, according to conventional history, weren't discovered until much later.
So, geographical features that shouldn't have been known to map makers in the 16th century.
Exactly, and that's where the whole OPART theory comes in.
Huh.
People who support this theory argue that the Piri Reis map had to have been based on older source maps, maybe from a civilization that had already explored and charted those regions long before European explorers got there.
That's wild. But if such a civilization existed, wouldn't we have found other evidence?
That's the missing piece of the puzzle, isn't it? Some researchers suggest that maybe the evidence is out there, but we haven't found it yet. Maybe it was destroyed by natural disasters, or maybe we've just overlooked it because it doesn't fit with our current understanding of history.
So we could be missing crucial pieces of the puzzle when it comes to understanding the whole story of human history.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to keep an open mind, to keep searching, and to never stop questioning what we think we know about the past.
Well said. You've given me a lot to think about today. I'm starting to see OPARTS in a whole new light. Not just as these weird, unexplained objects, but as potential clues to a past that's way more complex and mysterious than we ever imagined.
That's a great way to put it. OOPARTS are like invitations to explore the unknown, to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace the possibility that the story of humanity is still being written.
I love that. It's both humbling and super inspiring. So where do we go from here? How do we try to reconcile these OOPARTS with what we think we know about history?
That's the question, isn't it?
Wow.
And it's a question that's going to continue to spark debate and discussion for a long time to come.
It's like we're putting together this puzzle, but some of the pieces are either missing or they're from a totally different puzzle.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it. And that tension between what we think we know and what these OOPARTS suggest, that's what makes them so fascinating.
So how do we even approach OOPARTS? Like, how do we stay skeptical but also keep an open mind?
It's a tough balance, that's for sure. On the one hand, we have to be rigorous. Use scientific analysis, look at all the evidence, explore all the possible explanations.
Right, got to be grounded in reality.
Exactly. But on the other hand, we can't be afraid to consider ideas that might challenge our current understanding of history.
So, like, be detectives, looking for clues, but also be ready for the case to take some unexpected turns.
You got it. And just like a good detective, we can't jump to conclusions. Just because something is hard to explain with what we know now doesn't mean it's proof of aliens or time travel or something like that.
Yeah, got to keep those conspiracy theories in check. But at the same time, we shouldn't just dismiss something because it's weird or doesn't fit our current theories, right?
Absolutely. OOPARTS give us this amazing opportunity to, reevaluate our assumptions about the past, to consider other possibilities, to think outside the box.
And maybe even realize that our ancestors were capable of things we never thought possible.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. I'm looking at OOPARTS in a whole new way, not just as strange objects, but as potential keys to understanding history and even human potential in a deeper way.
That's a great way to put it. OOPARTS are more than just weird artifacts. They're reminders that we're still learning about the story of human civilization. There's so much more to uncover.
Well, you've definitely given me a lot to ponder. Before we wrap up, let's recap the key things we've learned about OOPARTS, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Good idea. So, first and foremost, OOPARTS challenge our timelines. They force us to question what we thought we knew about the past. And they suggest that our understanding of ancient civilizations and their technology might be incomplete. There could be entire chapters of history we haven't even discovered yet.
Right, and maybe most importantly, they teach us to stay skeptical but curious and open-minded. Just because something seems impossible based on what we know now doesn't mean it is.
Absolutely. OOPARTS encourage us to embrace the mystery, to keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the wonders of history.
Perfectly said. And for those listening who are now inspired to do their own OPART investigations, any final words of wisdom?
Stay curious, keep an open mind, and do your research. There's a ton of info out there, online, in libraries. You never know, you might stumble onto the next big mystery that changes how we understand history.
What a great note to end on. Huge thanks to you for sharing your expertise today. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking about this stuff.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and until next time, stay curious.